You're listening to Lexington Community Radio, WLXU 93.9, and this is Bike Talk.
I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Today we're talking about off-road cycling, and my guests are two guys who are very involved in this scene, Jason Monk and Troy Hearn. Hey guys, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Wanda.
We have so much to talk about because the off-road scene, off-road cycling is just booming in central Kentucky. There's so much going on, and we want to get into that a lot. But first, so we understand where you guys are coming from and your perspective and your background, I'd like to know a little bit more about who you are and how off-road cycling fits into your life. So Jason, why don't you go first? Because you ain't from around here, are you?
Yeah, that's right. That's my claim to fame, being from Australia. For me, I got into BMX when I was a kid. I was 6 years old, and we had a local club. And I had a buddy in my neighborhood and found out that he was into BMX, and I went along with him to a club night. It was a Wednesday night ride, a race, and I was hooked ever since. So yeah, BMX was kind of the
it was the gateway drug.
The gateway for me, yeah. Yeah, it's just, exciting and pretty accessible, and you didn't need an expensive bike. I actually rode a knockoff Schwinn bike back then with a banana seat and everything, and
wow, a banana seat.
Yeah, I had a set of pajamas with a BMX kit on it, so I wore those. And some kids made fun of me, but I didn't care. So yeah, I was one of those things that I was just hooked from that young age.
And it doesn't take much to get started.
Right, yep. And it's really cool when you've got, like what we've got now, great local clubs that are doing things and got events and other kids doing it too. That really helped me see the appeal in it, aside from just the fact that I was attracted to bike riding in the first place. So
you found a place to hook in and network.
Exactly.
And there's lots of places, even here in the United States, in Kentucky, there's places to hook up and get tuned into it.
Yep. So, so for me, BMX was my big thing. Did that for about 7 years, and then got into racing and kind of got a little bit burnt out. And as a teenager, just kind of rode casually, and then found it again as an adult, and then did some triathlons just very casually. And then Troy actually got me into road racing. I was just riding 4 triathlons at the time, and Troy had the bike shop back then, Capital City Cycles. And he was like, hey, there's a race in Longview Park in Louisville, and you should try it out. So I did, and kind of hooked because it was they had some really cool race circuits and stuff going on at the time. So yeah, I got into road racing, and then progressed to cyclocross. And then these days, I really enjoy riding the mountain bike and just being outside and kind of riding for different reasons now. And kind of got out of the race scene and all that stuff, but still ride pretty enthusiastically on the mountain bike.
So when it comes to off-road, you're familiar with just about every type of venue?
To a degree, yeah. I think I've got a pretty wide background. Having BMX as a kid was really helpful because it gives you some bike handling skills and some confidence on your bike to pick some things up as an adult when you're riding off-road.
Good. And now as an adult, you're here in Kentucky, and that's a whole nother story. That would be another show probably.
Right, yeah.
You're very active here in Kentucky. For starters, you have your own business.
Yeah, Easy Rider Cycling. I do bike tours in and around Kentucky. We get folks from out of town. I had a lady from Toronto last week. I was in town for a conference, and the distilleries, the bourbon distilleries, are doing a really good job with their tourism, and the Bourbon Trail has been created around that. So that's actually a good draw for folks coming in. It's got some internet presence and it's just becoming a draw for people to come and ride our roads and check out the distilleries. So.
Well, and then if there are people locally that want you to give them tours here or in other states, for example, you did a great job with a group of folks from the cycling club going on the Katy Trail.
Right,
and you took care of us on the Katy Trail.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I started out with the intention of marketing to people coming in to do the Bourbon Trail and that kind of thing in the horse farms. And then it's kind of evolved into, doing a lot of trips with locals from the club, going to places like the Katy Trail and the Gap Trail and Blue Ridge Parkway and Natchez Trace and those kind of places. So that's really keeping me busy, and word of mouth is great, and really enjoy doing that.
Yeah, and then you also work at Crankworks.
Yeah, yep.
So
working at Crankworks during the week. Yeah, getting some, trying to soak up as much Bill Crank knowledge as I can while I'm here. And
it's a good person to soak knowledge up from.
Yeah, I get to meet and talk to cool people that come in with bike questions. So yeah.
All right. Well, Troy, let's hear from you a little bit. Troy Hearn, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to love off-road cycling.
Well, I too started with BMX bikes as a small child. I also had the Schwinn knockoff, bright red with the, how did you say it?
Must have been the cool thing.
The banana seat.
Yeah,
I like the way you
seat,
say
yeah.
banana. But I had that, loved BMX growing up. I always had a kid's bike, or, from age 4 on, I had a kid's bike and a BMX bike. And then I got my first Huffy Santa Fe 10-speed road bike.
Oh, Troy Hearn on a Huffy.
Yeah. I went 20 miles an hour down a hill, and I thought I was going to die one day after being on the BMX bike. And, always had a bike growing up. And then in 1987, I bet Jason wasn't even born in 1987.
That's when I started BMX.
Okay. So he was little. Yeah. But in 1987, a friend of mine let me borrow his mountain bike. And in 1987, a mountain bike with just a steel, rigid frame bike, but it was fabulous. I loved it. And all of the flashback emotions from riding a BMX bike as a kid came out on that first ride. And it was an in-town ride. It was here in Lexington. I was a freshman at UK, and somebody let me borrow their mountain bike. And they were going on a trip, so they were going to be gone for a while, and they let me borrow the mountain bike, and I was hooked. Later that summer, back in 1987, I did a mountain bike race at Butler State Park. They used to have a lot of mountain bike events there. Then got a road bike as well, then started road riding with the bike club. And in the early 90s, got approached from folks from Louisville, and they were starting a statewide mountain bike organization that turned into the Kentucky Mountain Bike Association. And then the folks that I knew in Louisville that started that organization back in maybe 91, 92. And it's ebbed and flowed, and I've been involved with KIMBA ever since then.
And KIMBA is
the Kentucky Mountain Bike Association.
And we'll talk more about them later. Yeah.
And then, I've enjoyed cycling of all kinds. 1 wheel, 2 wheels, 3 wheels, 4 wheels. I've ridden almost everything. Fast forward 35 years later, I've worked in the bike industry, both at a retail side, a wholesale side, do a lot with advocacy. My real job, quote unquote, real job is related to bicycling and walking statewide. But, the old BMX days come out every time I get on a mountain bike. Of all the different types of cycling discipline, I think mountain biking is the most fun for me. So when I do advocacy work or help get a new trail system going, it is self-serving because I'm going to go ride it. We kind of sucked Jason in many, many years ago, and we volunteer him for a lot of things.
Sounds like you don't get much resistance.
Well, we don't. Well, it's self-serving for him as well. We talked him into being the trail steward, designer, and builder for our newest trail system at West 6 Farm in Frankfort. So he never says no. That's the thing. The only advice I give Jason now is sometimes, Jason, you have to say, no, I'm married. I've got kids. I've got to say no to that.
No, mate.
Yeah. So now we text his wife, can Jason come out this Saturday?
Can Jason come out and play?
She's like, only if he puts his time in at home first and does these little things there.
We've used some words for someone who is new to off-road cycling. Some of the words that we've used may be unfamiliar in types of cycling, like what is BMX?
BMX stands for bicycle motocross. It was a crossover from motorcycle racing for kids and folks that couldn't afford, motorcycles, and in a smaller venue. I think BMX probably started back in the late 60s, and it was kind of the West Coast to East Coast kind of thing. It was huge. It ebbed and flows. When I was a kid growing up in Kentucky, it was the NBL. There was the NBL and ABL, 2 different leagues for bicycle motocross. And then it just became BMX just became, the acronym for it
It
that
became
everybody
the thing
uses
for,
now.
all of it.
From what I gather, for in America was kind of the start of mountain biking, because it was on dirt for the most part. Some tracks do have asphalt turns, but it was on dirt. You could truly ride your BMX bike anywhere. It was an all-terrain bike. That's the bike that I rode to school was my BMX bike. Even after I had a road bike, my BMX bike was probably what I rode most of the time.
So when you think of BMX, I think of racing a lot. So BMX is often racing, kind of.
Yeah, it like a lot of things in cycling, there's different worlds exist within that world of cycling. So BMX started out more with racing, and nowadays you've got stunts and kind of freestyle riding as well, and they cross over a lot. But you'll find some BMX racers who don't do much of the freestyle and vice versa.
Well, we're going to take a short break, so stay tuned in. And we're going to talk about all of these different worlds of off-road cycling and how they cross over and how you can get started. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Today we're talking about off-road cycling, and my guests are two guys who have been doing this all of their lives, it sounds like, Jason Monk and Troy Hearn. And we've been talking a little bit about the different types of cycling, starting with BMX. Why don't we kind of back up a little bit, and how do you think about off-road cycling in general?
Well, I guess the term off-road cycling, I think of anything that's not on the pavement, where you're not riding in the same space with cars and trucks. It can be gravel roads. Well, my former work in the bike industry, there were a lot of national surveys done, and 65% of the adult population does not feel comfortable riding on a road with cars and trucks.
Understandably.
So that's more than the bulk of the population. So if we're going to get 65% of the adults out moving on bikes, how do you do that? Well, I think one of the reasons so many more people are riding off-road is there's more types of bicycles. There's a gravel bike, there's a cyclocross bike, of course the mountain bike, a BMX bike, and all those subsets of bikes are intended to ride off-road.
And even just hybrid bikes.
A hybrid bike, yeah.
People who don't want to do jumps and thrills and just trail riding.
And most people, thank goodness, are not as crazy as Jason and I. And they just want to ride their bike, and they want to go from point A to point B, and they don't necessarily want to do it on the road with cars and trucks. So they'll either ride on the sidewalk, cemeteries, gravel roads. Very fortunate we have a lot of mountain bike trail systems around here now, but it's pretty much any kind of riding where you're just not on the pavement with motorized traffic, whether that be BMX riding, cyclocross, gravel grinding, and most of that is just riding. Of course, all of that, there is a competitive side to it. So if you want to race gravel, rides, or if you want to race BMX or mountain biking, you certainly can. But for the most part, it's just riding anywhere that you're not on the pavement and you're not competing, in that space with cars and trucks.
And in central Kentucky, and we're going to talk more about how our trail system has evolved and how it's just expanded exponentially in the last few years. But the equipment for off-road cycling, as you said, has evolved a lot too.
Yes, like we talked about, there's lots of subsets of bikes, and I think as more people have gotten into off-road cycling and kind of found out like the different ways you can do that, the demand for these bikes to do different things has kind of grown. So Troy mentioned cyclocross and gravel bikes. Well, they used to be the same thing. And nowadays there's enough people doing gravel riding only and not cyclocross racing that they've decided to build gravel bikes. And they are slightly different, but they're pretty similar. Yeah, the equipment's definitely changing a lot. Things are getting safer, things are getting more specific. Bikes can carry a lot of bags these days. They can fit wider tires. The tires have evolved a lot to handle the different demands they're putting on them. Mountain biking, I can talk for hours about that. There's all the technical stuff that they're doing. It's kind of cool and kind of frustrating sometimes. Yeah, the gear's Gear's really cool how it's been evolving and makes these things easier to do and more fun at the same time.
And if someone wants to get off on a trail, they've not been off on a trail before, they want to get started doing some kind of off-road cycling, just going down a gravel road or a path at Veterans Park, what kind of advice would you give to someone who just wants to get started? Because when you all started, you started with a Schwinn with a banana seat.
That was a Schwinn knockoff, by the way.
Oh, sorry, Schwinn knockoff.
I'll jump in. I've been practicing this line at the bike shop. For me, I recommend, if you don't know what you want to get into, I recommend just like a hardtail mountain bike because they're pretty versatile. You can still ride those on the road. They're not the fastest thing out there, but you're still that bike's gonna handle that job pretty well. And then it can do pretty extreme things, and it can do gravel roads just fine too. And you're gonna be pretty comfortable doing all of those things. It's not gonna be the fastest thing in every different situation, but yeah, it just handles a wide array of activities. Yeah, usually that's what I recommend. And like the plus size tire hardtail mountain bike is usually a pretty good fit for most folks, but they come in different configurations as well. There's adventure bikes and gravel bikes too, and they kind of cross over a little bit. But
so probably just go into your local friendly bike shop and say, hey, I want to get started on something off-road. And usually the ladies in the shop are great, and they are really enthusiastic about helping new people out.
Absolutely. We're very fortunate in the Lexington area to have a lot of really, really nice bike shops. The staff there, they practice what they preach. They talk the talk, ride the ride. But, you're able to test ride the bikes. You get a good sense of kind of the type of ride that you're going to do versus on the kind of bike you're testing. When we're, trying to promote the off-road riding, we let folks know, once you get the bike, kind of figure out what you need. Go to your local park. Veterans Park is a local trail system. They have a paved off-road trail, and then they have a little bit more technical, dirt mountain bike trail system. There's easy parts to it, and there's, I guess, more technical parts to it, although
something for everyone.
That's not an overall, really hard trail. But then start locally. That way, depending on what part of Lexington you live in, you can just ride your bike to the trail system. It's small enough that you can kind of ride it a couple of times and get to know it. And then as you graduate and get bored with that, and you want to try a little bit more challenging or adventurous cycling, if you want to try like some great, awesome gravel rides, you can go up to the Cave Run area, the Boone National Forest area. There's hundreds of miles of gravel road all through there. And then we also have local mountain bike trails. We've got Capitol View Park. It's a great place to kind of segue from Veterans Park. It's about a 10-mile trail system, and it's got a little bit of trail flavor for everybody. And then a lot of times you just got to go and do it. When
just
you go
do
in,
it.
well, when you take advice from
Do
folks
it.
like Jason and I that ride, or if you take advice from people at the bike shop, it can be overwhelming. A lot of times folks think, well, they're just trying to sell me all this stuff. Well, no, they're trying to show you everything that you'll eventually need. You need the bike.
And educate you.
Absolutely. You need the helmet, for safety
Definitely a
purpose. You
helmet,
got to take care of your brain. If you're good looking like Jason, you got to keep those good looks there. He wears a full face helmet just for that reason. Gloves. There's a lot of equipment you need because of safety. Of course, gloves and the padded shorts and the jerseys and all that material makes it more fun, more comfortable. If you're more comfortable and having more fun with it, you're going to do it more. And then other things like if you have a shock that takes air, you need an air pump that's able to work with that. And it's really easy to get super, super technical really, really quick. But the main thing is, once you get people to a certain level of readiness, they have to go ride. They're going to experience more, on that adventure of the actual ride. Hopefully, and we try to encourage them to let people know where they're going to go ride. Maybe some of the local folks that know that trail will kind of steward them and take them around. And you also want to let people know you're going riding in case you don't show up home for dinner. You need to know where you are.
Always let someone know your route. Yeah. And you had mentioned a couple of times skill handling. So off-road is a little bit different from riding on a road, that it requires a little bit of a different skill set.
yes, If you're coming from a road biking background, there's a couple of things you might want to adjust about the way you ride. Let's say you want to try a gravel ride and you're used to riding on the road. A couple of things you want to do. Well, just to start with, your bike's going to have wider tires. So you want to run that tire pressure a little bit lower than you're used to. And that can be a harder habit to unlearn than it might sound. You're kind of used to your tires feeling really firm because it feels fast. But that actually works against you on the gravel road. You're more likely to slide out, lose your front tire around a corner, or you're going to hit a couple of potholes here and there, no matter how careful you are. So those softer tires will help with all that. You need to kind of scan the ground a little bit more, just like a little second nature thing. You need to relearn, watch out for roots and rocks and that kind of thing. If you're riding in a group, leave a bit more space. Stuff happens more frequently on a gravel road. Things, sticks come out of nowhere and that kind of thing. You can't stop as quickly because you don't have the same traction you do on the road when you're on gravel. So a couple little things like that. Yeah. Anything you can think of that I'm not touching on that we talked about on the Katy Trail?
Troy, can you think of anything?
Well, one of the best advice I had ever heard about what do we need to know about riding our bike, either off-road, on-road, gravel, or whatever. And it was an old British racer that I had met. And his quote was, ride your bike, ride your bike, ride your bike. Mm-hmm. So whatever type of riding that you want to do, if you want to get good at it, you just have to go ride. Fortunately, with the Bluegrass Cycling Club for on-road and the KIMBA, the Kentucky Mountain Bike Association, and all the local bike shops now, they seem to be so willing to depart all their knowledge upon you and help you. And there's so many awesome, nice people that are willing to meet you to go for a ride and that are willing to help you. I don't know if they just weren't around when I was, in my early 20s, or it was a different culture. And then in particular with like the Kentucky Mountain Bike Association, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen that the growth of the sport needed to go hand in hand with education and awareness and skills training. And the last 4 years in particular, the Mountain Bike Association has hosted skills clinics. Jason's one of the jump downhill master clinic folks for that. I do that as well. And we've also had a lot of the folks in the bike club and the Mountain Bike Association get trained to become instructors for those kinds of things too.
So there's lots of expertise out there. We're going to take another break. We're going to talk about cool places you can go nearby. And Troy has teased us a little bit with a few of those. We're going to get into places you can go to check out some off-road cycling and talk more about some of those wonderful, friendly people with the Bluegrass Cycling Club and KIMBA who can help you and how to get involved with them. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Today we're talking about off-road cycling. My guests are two guys who know this stuff really well, Jason Monk and Troy Hearn. And we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about all of the different places that you can go to do off-road cycling, both locally and regionally in central Kentucky. Troy, can you talk a little bit first about what people can access here in our own backyards, and also how KIMBA has been involved in making all of this happen?
Absolutely. We're very fortunate that we now have 5 trail systems, all within a 25 to 30 mile radius of Lexington area. We've got Life Adventure Center right around the corner in Woodford County, Capitol View Park in Frankfort, Veterans Park here at Fayette County, the Skullbuster Trail System, which is named after the community called Skullbuster, not the trail system.
Really? That's interesting.
It's a whole story in itself. And our newest trail system in Franklin County, also West 6th Farm property that we've developed trails in there. All of those trail systems were designed, constructed, and maintained by KIMBA. And our local chapter is the Bluegrass chapter. There are 5 KIMBA chapters now in our state. And our example is now replicated in 5 different regions around the state. So we've got our local trails. Each of those other chapters have their local trails as well. All of the trails are a great example of how a organization like KIMBA can not only work with local city parks departments, which Capitol View Park and Veterans Park are also city parks. But Life Adventure Center and West 6th are private property. So we've worked really, really well with that private-public partnership in that way. Skullbuster Trail System is Scott County, and that's county-owned property. So we work with the county fiscal court so that's all kind of helped us step our game up quite a bit for everything related to maintaining a trail, designing a trail, building a trail, and keeping that conversation going long term for some of these trail systems. The Capitol View Park Trail is the one I work with the most.
That one's been around a while.
That one's been around for about 23 years now. So
granddaddy.
We've learned a lot. Yeah, we really use that to cut our teeth a lot. Prior to all these local trails, there have been trails here and there. Veterans Park had some old trails in it many, many years ago, but it was just a mile or two. But prior to all these local trails, you had to drive an hour and a half to go ride, trails like in the National Forest and so on. And they weren't maintained to the standard that we're really spoiled with now. And then, you got all these different chapters of Kimba that have all the trails that they maintain and develop in their each area. But so now you have regional linkage between trail systems. It's conceivable that you could go maybe ride 2 or 3 different trail systems in a day. And I know Jason travels a lot to all the other trails, the regional and even the stuff that might be right around the border of our state.
Yeah, Jason, tell us a little bit about the regional trails and the access that we have to those.
Yeah, Kentucky has some great landscape for mountain bike trails. Like Troy mentioned, we've got a lot of trails locally within an hour's or so drive of Lexington. And then, around the state, we've got some really cool adventures to be had out there. Personally, I really like the Daniel Boone National Forest. There's a lot of great... Well, let's start with the Sheltowee Trace. Is a 320-something mile trail.
Linear trail.
Yeah, you can do the whole... You can ride about 90% of that. And there's people that have done through trips on that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people who go to Cave Run Lake, which is in the Daniel Boone National Forest,
Yep.
or to Holly Bay. I've heard of, down that way, that there's a lot of
Laurel Lake
area, Holly Bay at Laurel Lake.
Yeah, and those are different segments of the Sheltowee that you can ride. Yeah, so Cave Run Lake, Laurel Lake is great. Laurel Lake's a really good spot actually because you've got a range of trail levels down there. The shoreline trail is relatively beginner friendly, and then when you go north or south of that, you can find some really what I describe backcountry, not as well maintained, but they're really out there. So you can really
So if Jason says it's really out there,
it's really out there.
It's really out
it's
there.
really out there.
You want to think about a plant. Yeah. As in, like, how much water you're taking and who knows where you are and that kind of thing, because some of those places are hard to get out of if you're got something going on with your bike or your body,
The key word being adventure.
Yeah. So those are some really cool examples of great terrain, and you see waterfalls out there. It's not just riding your bike; it's going and seeing cool places while you're out there. Yeah, so you got Eastern Kentucky is really kind of taking off. We've seen some other trail networks in the last 5-10 years come together. Prestonsburg has done a really great job out there. It's an old mountaintop removed property, right? Coal mining property that's been repurposed, and they've got a really cool network of trails. It's about 3-ish hours from Lexington to get there.
It's not too bad.
And the whole, like, the mayor is behind it. There was a story out there. Someone reported that there was a hunter in the middle of the night, or late in the evening anyway, out there. And the mayor stopped what he was doing and went out there and tried to track the guy down because he wanted to preserve what they've got out there and make sure that no one was turned off from the trails. And so anyway, there's some really cool places like that around the state going on right now. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, and Kimba in general, with all the state chapters, maintain about 34 different trail systems now in the state. And those are ones that are maintained just by Kimba. The property that Jason mentioned in Prestonsburg, Sugar Camp Mountain, that's local. The local government and the advocates there have done that on their own. A lot of the trails in far western part of the state and in northern Kentucky up near Cincinnati, I think the last time I counted, there's about 60 different trail systems in our state that are worthwhile to go and visit. And I think a lot of that is caused an explosion of just off-road riding in general.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Troy, because there really is an explosion. What are the reasons for that? You think this is just becoming such a boom in
Well,
Central
just
Kentucky now?
access and accessibility. Like if you live here in Lexington, if you have, just that basic hardtail mountain bike, you can go and ride a different trail system every day of the week for maybe 2 weeks and not have to drive more than maybe 2 or 3 hours at the most. And some of them, like Jason said, are, somewhat beginner friendly. They're not, hardcore, adventurous, dangerous kind of things. But some of the trail systems are. So as your ability level increases, as your urge to experience more adventure increases, there's just so many more options and accessibility for folks to go explore that.
Kimba has played a major role in this in terms of the accessibility and trail development. I know, Jason, you talked a little bit about helping develop these trails. Can you talk about your experience in doing that?
Yeah, that's been a real educational process for me and a lot of fun, and definitely a big rabbit's hole that I can easily lose myself in. Yeah, Kimba, we couldn't have done it without Kimba's help. So they provide the tools, the insurance, the knowledge base. I can turn to seasoned trail builders and maintenance people like Troy and several people in the club for advice on how to, how the best way to deal with things, because there's often several ways to do it. But yeah, at the West 6 Farm, I've been out there for the past roughly 18 months working on these trails. And
it's a long time.
Yeah, and I say 18 months. I'm not out there every day, obviously, but I'm doing this on a volunteer level, so I try and get out there roughly once a week and put in, a day's work. So, which adds up, but it's been a lot of fun and been learning how to do it as I go. And definitely got a deeper appreciation for what it takes to design, build, and now maintain these trails that we've got in the area.
Well, and a lot of this trail development and trail upkeep as well is all volunteer based.
Correct. Yeah. And it's you've got to find folks that know how to do it and have the time available to do it and can be, reliable. Quite often, Troy says there's tons of people with great ideas, which we all have, but not that many people that can put the time in and commit to it to finish it. So it's the challenge of volunteers for sure. But Kimba's there providing the tools and giving us gas money, and definitely wouldn't be able to happen without the club's support there.
All right. Well, we're going to take another short break, and we'll be back with you in a few moments talking about how you can take advantage of these trail systems that have been so graciously built and are maintained by volunteers, and how Kimba can help get you there. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Today we've been talking about off-road biking, and we're here with two awesome guys who know off-road biking really, really well, Jason Monk and Troy Hearn. We have been talking all throughout this show about this organization called KIMBA, the Kentucky Mountain Biking Association, and the local chapter, the Bluegrass chapter, which you all are very, very involved in. Can you tell me a little bit more about this organization and what its mission is and what it's been doing?
Well, the KIMBA mission in general is to advocate for off-road trail systems of all kinds, bring as many folks into being able to take advantage of the off-road trail systems we have here, not only advocate for the usage of the trail systems, but the growth of more trail systems, sustainable design, construction, maintaining of the trails, that good collaboration between local governments and private entities and and just try to bring more folks into the sport, beginners, kids, women, men, just all those things in general. The state organization is, of course, a 501c3. We decided years ago, as we started to develop more trail systems and more people were starting to ride, that kind of dividing the state up into chapters. We're the Bluegrass chapter, of course, because we're in the heart of the Bluegrass, but we also have the Louisville chapter. We have the Red River Gorge, Cave Run area, the Southwest area, and we also have the Lincoln Trail area. I should know that because their stickers all have Vince wearing a big Abraham Lincoln hat there too. Yeah. So that's just our mission, is to get people into the sport, sustain the sport by helping to maintain the trails we have now, and create more trails if the opportunity arises. And then as we noticed, we started getting more beginners and women into the sport. A lot of the women that started to be involved with the club and ride with us, they see Jason out there doing these crazy, amazing things on trails on his bike. And they said, well, hey, how do we do that? We want to learn how to do that. So one of the folks involved in our organization, Bethany O, said, hey, let's put together a skills clinic. So for about the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a Kimba-sponsored women's skills clinic. We've also had kids and just beginner skills clinics. This year, we're doing a beginner men's skills clinic as well.
Men are beginners too.
Because there's beginners at all level. And we have some of the best qualified, certified mountain bike skills instructors and coaches from really all over this part of the United States that come and teach our class. Over the years, we've had some of our own folks in our club become certified instructors, trail builders. We work with national parks and state parks and local parks. So we now have Kimba-sponsored power equipment safety classes. Took our chainsaw safety class this year on a Friday the 13th, which I thought was a little bit ironic. But
sorry, I missed that one.
When we do a lot of our clinics and classes and skills classes and trail building classes, we bring folks like Jason in. Jason's one of our newest trail stewards at the West 6 Farm. So he's kind of been indoctrinated into, you don't go out and just start digging a dirt path. You have to look at, what's the cross slope, what's the incline, what's the water going to do on that trail. And when we get to a creek crossing, do we build a bridge or do we, do some other way of making, let folks get across the creek?
And then once you build it, it has to be maintained.
Of course, yeah.
Where the volunteer stewards come in.
Yeah, well, Jason knows now that it's better to just put big giant rocks in there to make it to where you can ride through the creek on the big giant flat rocks instead of building a bridge, because the bridge has to be maintained and do that. But we do a lot of social events all throughout the year. We do have a website as kimba.org, and then you can click on the Bluegrass chapter there. Of course, we have several social media outlets. I'm getting to be kind of old, so I'm still on Facebook, but we also have an Instagram account and a Twitter account, albeit they're not used as much because we need some young folks in the club to kind of take over our Twitter and Instagram and our Snapchat account and so on. Jason, you're young. Maybe you can start taking those over as well. Yeah. And then, as far as, just folks helping, I think Jason, being the trail steward for our newest trail system, he probably has a lot of input on how folks can get in and get their hands dirty.
Yeah, so there's always a need for folks to come out and help maintain trails. And you can do that lots of different ways. And like a very basic level, one thing I've thought about recently that anyone can do really is just get a little handsaw and keep that on your belt loop or in your backpack and just keep that handy. Sometimes you come across a small down tree that's partially blocking the trail, and you can take care of that on the spot with your handsaw. So that can be really helpful for trail stewards if everyone's out there doing a little bit of stuff like that. And then we have trail days, so that's obviously a bit more of a commitment, but we have been regularly getting 20 plus people out to the trail days lately that give up their whole Sunday to come and hang out with friends and work on some trails and take care of some big projects, which we always have a list of on our local trails. So yeah, that's two kind of small and larger ways you can get involved. And then we've got folks out there that are helping on a regular basis. A lot of unsung heroes out there weed eating all the time, which takes a lot of time, putting in a lot of hours per week on a regular basis. This time of year, the weeds just exploded like the last month or two.
Lots of rain.
Yeah, the rain.
Jason always thought I was just being whiny when I talked about the hundreds of hours of weed eating that we do.
Yeah, it's endless, yeah. Yeah, so if you've got spare time, which most people don't, but if you want to make that time in your week, we can always accept help with the weed eating. If you live close by to one of the trails, and again, if you want to do something that's kind of self-serving in a way, help us with the weed eating. Get in contact with us. Let us know. Even if you can just do, a day per month, that's really helpful.
And even a lot of folks just honestly don't have the time, or just maybe they're not physically able to go and do some of the grunt work that Jason and I and a lot of the other folks do. But just becoming a member of Kimba, we are a 501c3. So any membership dues you might pay, or any donation, obviously to the club as a tax write-off, but the equipment we use. Back in the day, 20 years ago, the few folks that did maintain the trails, we used our own equipment. We used our own chainsaws and our own weed eaters. And I would kill a weed eater every year, maintaining about 10 miles of trail at Capitol View Park. So now we have a partnership with the Steel Power Equipment and all the folks that sell steel equipment in the state. They give us a really, really great deal on the equipment. They service a lot of our equipment for us, but having a dedicated professional level equipment to go out and maintain the trails makes such a big difference. My old Sears weed eater is a far cry from, I think, the Steel FS90 weed eater that I have now, which could chop down a small tree, I think.
So get involved in KIMBA.
KYMBA.org.
KYMBA.org. You can find out how to be a member. You can find out how to get involved in trail days. You can get maps. So you can go out cycling anywhere locally or in the Central Kentucky region. You'll have all of that knowledge at your fingertips. But get out and cycle. Just get out and do it, as someone said before.
And one thing we didn't mention lately, John and Kay Strom have done a really good job of organizing group rides or group events, and more or less just a cookout at the trailhead and a group of people getting together and riding. Those have been $10. Get a hot dog out of that and a chance to hang out with friends. But again, the money is mainly there to help us pay for the gas and the maintenance of the tools that go into making these trails accessible. They wouldn't be there without that and your membership money. So $10 for a hot dog and a hang out with friends is a pretty good thing to be. An easy way to get involved.
And a way to help maintain the trails.
I think they're calling that Franks and Berms. And I think that's going to be the third Thursday of every month, or third Thursday of every month.
Third Thursday of every month.
And we try to have all those at local trails.
So third Thursday of every month, a Frank and Berm during the good weather.
Yes,
I would
weather
assume.
permitting.
All right. So check out kymba.org, and you can get all of this information. And that's all the time we have for today's show. So I'd like to thank my guests again, Jason Monk and Troy Hearn, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Don't forget to tune in to Bike Talk at the same time next week for all things cycling, helping you get out, explore our towns and countryside, and all the trails in Lexington and beyond. Thanks for joining us. Be safe and enjoy the ride and the trail.